Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Patreon Supporter Spotlight 57. I actually got a bit turned around with which week this was supposed to go out, so yeah, this is actually a week later than it's meant to be being recorded, so oops, I can only apologise for that. However, we're here now and we're kicking off this Tanks edition with Katia in the AT-15A, which she really likes for some reason. I obviously wouldn't know what it's like to really be a fan of a tank that everybody else thinks is completely rubbish, so I can't possibly imagine why she would enjoy a tank that's obviously rubbish, but there you go. This has to be one of the few machines that's ever been introduced to the game with like standard matchmaking and then been put down to limited matchmaking. In fact, it might be the only one I can think of where that's ever happened. So yeah, I mean, it's not good. Even now, it's not particularly good, but if you get yourself into a situation where you can really use what this thing has to offer, then, you know, sometimes it works out. And I guess it does have some good qualities to it. You know, the gun for its tier is pretty decent, considering it's now got limited matchmaking. The armor is okay, and it's got a pretty good DPM, so if you get a chance to just sit somewhere and use that DPM, it's great. But it's not really what Katia's doing right now, is it? I mean, I think you can see what's happening in this game, and I think you can see that this is maybe not going to be an entirely serious replay. She does make a couple of mistakes though. She should be a bit more to her left. She should be following with that KV-13 and the T-34, because at the moment, the way she's approaching the enemy lines, and, you know, of all the things shooting at her, it's artillery and the two derp-gunned machines, including this OI, that are the biggest threat. Although I suppose the SU-100, if they manage to penning hit at this range into her weak spots, that'd be a problem as well. But she's approached in such a way that she's managed to get tanks on both her left and her right, which is not ideal. She's got to turn her back to somebody. And she actually chooses to turn towards the OI, and I think, honestly, that might have been the wrong thing to do. Although, the KV-13 alone might have struggled against this guy, but we've also got artillery hitting the OI, so I think the KV-13 alone probably would have been alright. So she's not done exactly a lot of damage so far, but she's bounced, by contrast, over 3,500. She's also, however, at this point, lost quite a lot of hit points and has a damaged engine, so we're actually going to jump ahead slightly rather than watch her maneuver for 30 plus seconds up a slight incline at very slow speeds. You'll note, by the way, she's got a premium repair kit and the regular repair kit. The premium version, I mean, obviously you can use it in a pinch if you have to, but if you don't use it, it's not costing you anything just to have it there, and it gives you a passive bonus to your cruise repair skill. So if you're confident that your tank's not going to catch on fire readily, it's actually not a bad choice to have in one of these heavily armoured slow machines where you're going to be repairing your tracks a lot. So the OI is dealt with. The KV-13 on the other hand, I think they've managed to get themselves stuck, and I'm not sure that Katia realised that, otherwise she would have been easily able to help them out. I'm guessing they got wedged on the corpse of that OI. So the T-34-100's turned around to deal with this mad person who's pushing the base in an AT-15A over the open. She's had the M7 shooting at her all the while, and now the VK is doing it as well. Artillery's also been taking pot shots. There is a KV-2 back there somewhere, but they've not been firing at her, which is probably a good thing, otherwise she'd be in a much worse state, if not outright dead. And the rest of her team is now steadily pushing across. So even though this was, by all lights, a terrible plan, it's still kind of working out, because she's provided a pretty big distraction for the enemy team. One of their few top tier tanks has come all the way to that position to try and deal with her, and that means that the team on the high ground is now just sweeping across, and it looks like they're well on track to winning this. So she's not exactly done a huge amount of damage. She's gotten over 1,000. She's gotten about 1,000 in terms of spotting, but it's one of those times when, even though necessarily it's not going to be a good result, and it was a silly plan, I think we can all agree that, but it's worked out. It's helped win the game anyway, even if it was a silly plan. And sometimes silly plans are fun. Sometimes you don't want to play seriously. Sometimes you want to try and do something a bit silly. And talking of silly, well, yeah, this is the last couple of enemy tanks, and they're sitting behind her right now. This M7 must not know the weak spots on this thing. They absolutely must not. Even at point blank range, they're just bouncing like everything. They're even trying, like, no, it wasn't them firing HE, it was the S51 that, okay, that was friendly. I saw HE pop up on the thing, but no. Okay, yes, it's like a 6-pounder gun on the M7, so it does have enough pen for the weak spots, but this guy's just firing at her thickest rear armour, and in the end, it's the FV that finishes her off. Now, the sensible thing to do, well, would have not been to be there in the first place, but if you're in that situation in a tank destroyer and you don't want someone to get behind you, being closer to the border basically would have helped. She could have scraped them off against the border, and then they wouldn't have been able to get behind her, and she could have even forced them in front of her gun. So if you're in that kind of situation in a tank destroyer, be near something that you can use to stop tanks going from behind you, basically. So she could possibly have survived that. You know, maybe not, but I'm just saying possibly, with a little bit more planning and positioning. That could have been a scenario where she survived despite the slightly ridiculous plan of driving across the open. But as it was still an okay result, all things considered. And she did make a profit, which I guess is the point of playing a premium tank. So, talking of slightly ridiculous premium tanks, we're going to jump to one of the newer ones in the game, the ELC Even 90, which, alongside another ELC we have in the game, was basically a response to a, it would have been a French army requirement to design a tank that could be used by airborne forces, you know, that could be dropped in alongside airborne troops and jeeps just to give them a bit more beef. As you've probably heard in other places, it's not great. Now, the concept is not a bad one. It is very mobile. It's got a pretty good horsepower per ton. It is incredibly sneaky. This might even be one of the sneakier light tanks in the game. But the downfall of it is the firepower. It's got a 3-round auto-loading, I think 90mm gun. The pen's not bad. The handling is pretty meh. But it's a French light tank, so you kind of expect that. The DPM, however, is atrocious. It's just bad. And this is where it falls down as a concept, because most players, most decent players anyway, they don't want to rely too much on their teammates. And if you're specialised as a passive scout, and this is a good map for this, you know, not every map can handle this playstyle. Not every map is good for this. You're 100% relying on your teammates to shoot the things that you're spotting. You know, you take the risk to getting where you're getting, and if your teammates just aren't doing the work, then that's it. You know, you're just wasting your time, or so it can feel like. In this case, that's not going to happen. Mawo is actually going to do pretty well out of this spotting wise. It's not going to be spectacular, but it's still going to be pretty decent. But most players much more prefer a tank where they can be an active participant and they're not just solely relying on picking up passive spotting damage. So he obviously senses he figures he's milked that flank for as much spotting damage as he's going to get, so he goes in and manages to finish off the low health M103, and it really is only very low health targets that this thing can comfortably engage. But you see here just why the DPM is so bad. He could have had shots at that Japanese heavy, he could have had shots at that T-44, but instead he had to sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait. And it's possible he's tried to buff the reload by having vents. He's almost certainly got optics, as you can see. He's also got camo net, but it's either vents or maybe vert stabs for the third equipment slot. I'm not sure which. So having finally reloaded, I mean, he even got moving before the T-44 died because he knew he wasn't going to get the kill. So yeah, he's moved off in search of the enemy artillery, and we know where the bulk of the enemy team must be as well. They're all up on the hill somewhere that's in the middle of the map, and he's actually going to get to spot them. And you're going to get to see a bit of what this tank is good at in this replay. You know, you've seen what it's bad at with that attempt to go in and do a bit of damage, which, you know, he did do a little bit of damage, but it wasn't great. But this is classic active scouting. And it used to be that you would have machines like the T-50, the old ELC was quite good at this. Just any fast, relatively small light tank where you could just run around like a mad hare, have all the things shooting at you and therefore revealing themselves and getting away with it because, you know, you're fast and you're small and you're hard to hit. He didn't really pick up any extra spotting damage for that, though. I mean, maybe a little bit, but he has attracted the attention of this batch at 12T, and that's not so good. He wants to keep his distance from this guy, so he can't really respot the enemy tanks on the hill opposite now. He's got to deal with this 12T, and he does actually manage to land a hit there, and actually lands the second hit, and I think probably tracks him. But at that point, well, his clip's expended, and he can't do anything more. He also took a shell from the 12T in the tracks himself. I think that's also got a 90mm gun, but I think it's more pen, or is it less? I can't actually remember. I can't remember the pen on this thing either, but I know it's not great, but it's not terrible. You know, of all the things to complain about, the penetration of the gun is kind of, I don't know, you could say it's mediocre at worst. It's certainly not the worst thing about this machine. So he circles around a little bit, gets the reload, and now he's going to try and pick up the 12T, who is now within the range of being killed by this gun. You know, he got that one hit, and that was enough to reduce the hit points to where he can comfortably clip this guy. The 12T presumably themselves are reloading because they don't actually try and shoot back, unless he just caught them so unawares, unless they just were not expecting it. The 30, however, is pointed this way, and ouch, yeah, okay, that was either a really low roll for the 128mm or a high roll from the long 88mm. I'm not sure which, but I guess we'll see when we get up close. However, he manages to get a sneaky long-range shot there, so that's a little bit of extra damage, and so you know, he gets something out of the last bit of that clip at least. He doesn't have to just reload and have that shell be, you know, wasted, or the time spent loading that shell previously be wasted, to be more accurate. So he's just going to go in now. The 30's there. The 30 probably knows he's coming. He takes the hits, but he can, and he can also finish this guy off. So it's just a last bit of damage and a last kill. So the good news there is that his team didn't suck, and the map didn't suck, and he was able to get to a spot where he could pick up a whole bunch of spotting damage, and he got the majority of his spotting damage in that first section that I sped up. And although he also spotted a bunch of tanks, he didn't really get any medals there. So combined, that was 3,700, nearly 3,800 and 1,800 damage done. That was enough for the top of the team. Almost 1,300 base XP. That's actually not bad, but I mean, this thing is still relatively new, so there are probably lots of people running around, and it's quite, you know, competitive to get an ace in it at the moment. But yeah, this was probably about as good as you could expect, getting a map where you can do that passive spotting and, you know, rolling the die and getting lucky and getting a team that doesn't totally suck, because you just can't rely on that. And as I say, most good players will prefer to be in a tank where they can actively make a difference. Now, talking about being in a tank where you can actively make a difference, oh boy! This is King Trigon in the newly introduced Object 268 version 4. Now, I covered one of the other new tanks, well, the other new Soviet tanks already, the ISM, which, you know, if that had just been introduced on its own, would have seemed mildly problematic, but maybe not overly so. This thing, on the other hand, alongside the new Tier 10 medium tank, yeah. This thing basically has just about everything you could possibly want and more, except possibly a turret. that's the only failing of this machine. It doesn't have a turret. You'll notice there he easily outstripped all the heavy tanks, and you would therefore think, okay, this thing's probably got terrible armor. Oh boy, no. No, it does. It's got wonderful armor. It's got basically the best armor of any of the tier 10 tank destroyers, pretty much. And so the fact that it's got lackluster accuracy doesn't really matter, because you just run up to people and stick your gun in their face. The fact that it doesn't have a turret doesn't really matter, because you can just run up to people and stick your gun in their face. And the only real downside is if you're going to be that you overextend and are then surrounded. So, you know, there's that risk, but otherwise this thing really does get to have its cake and eat it. It's ridiculous. The only thing where it's not necessarily, you know, amazingly overpowered and wonderful is the DPM. But even then, it's not like the DPM's bad, it's just, it's okay. And it becomes even more okay when you can comfortably, without worry, close to the ranges where you can use that DPM and just never have to worry about missing. If you were only ever sniping with this machine with, what, like 0.4 accuracy, it wouldn't be particularly good. But this is not exactly sniping, is it? No, this is getting in the face of multiple high-tier heavy tanks. And he knows he can do it, because this thing is so wonderfully balanced. I don't know what to say. You know, what other tank destroyer could you do this in? At this range, you know, the Badger, maybe, if you could somehow hide your lower front plate. But even then, I think the Badger, there might be spots frontally where one of these heavy tanks could pen, but they're just, these guys have no chance. They're just struggling so badly, and you can just rush in, you can push into people's faces, and you can make them panic because suddenly they've got this untouchable machine that they can't do much about. And if he'd been here alone, if he'd gone in and gotten himself surrounded, then this might have been a different story. But of course he's got allies with him. It's like he's the, you know, he's the sledgehammer that's that's, you know, breaking on the, I don't even know where, I'm trying to go for an analogy here and it's not quite working, but anyway, you know, he's the thing that's running in and taking all the hits and taking all the attention, and his teammates were just able to go in and blast away at the same time. So he's absolutely in control here. He's the one pushing the pace. He's just decimated this chunk of the enemy team that was in the town. And it didn't help that they had that Type 4 heavy hanging out back there. It's a really silly place to be, but would it have made a huge difference? I don't know. I mean, maybe a better player in that Type 4 heavy could have actually done something to him, because of course, you know, the Japanese big old heavy tank derp guns, they don't care about the armor. They're still going to do some damage either way, but even then they're going to be doing less damage than they would against more thinly armored tanks, because it's just the nature of how the game mechanics work. More armor, you know, negates more HE splash damage, essentially. So nearly 5,000 damage done, and just again completely outpacing all of the heavy tanks that are with him. And this thing, it's got almost as good a horsepower per ton ratio as the flipping even 90. That's how good it is. It's ridiculous. This this is my favourite bit of this replay, by the way. 103B never stood a chance. I don't even know what to say. It's just literally ploughed into him, and that was that. He was doomed. I mean, the entire enemy team was doomed the moment they saw a player, a competent player in this thing. And hell, even a not competent player would still get away with quite a lot, because it's just so stupidly good. So it's just the last couple of enemy tanks desperately trying to do something. The enemy Japanese heavies were not good. There was one that was in a silly position, and then this one, this Oho, which was completely AFK. It ultimately might not have made a difference, but two Japanese dirt guns, you know, may have meant that he ended this game with less health. But as it was, I think it still probably would have been a win. 8.2k damage, 1900 damage blocked, and he even got, like, what, nearly 1500 assistance damage. High caliber, obviously he's going to be top of the team, but all that, and not even an ace tanker, because I mean, I said, you know, a lot of people playing even 90 and it's ridiculously competitive at the moment. I think this thing's always going to be ridiculously competitive unless it gets some significant nerfs, which, oh boy, it needs. Because, you know, it's overpowered, and it's so blatantly overpowered, and it just leads me to, you know, say, what the fuck, wargaming? It's one of those rare times when I will indulge in the use of a curse word because it seems entirely appropriate. What the fuck, wargaming? Just what the fuck? Really? You're not exactly encouraging me to come back and play the game here, you know? Anyway, so, yeah, it's a bit ridiculous is what I'm saying, and not in a good way. So that's it for this particular tranche of Patreon supporter videos. I think I'm right in saying I've still got a spot open at the moment for the top level supporters. So yeah, if the idea of playing with me for an hour a week seems appealing, that is available at the moment, but do bear in mind that, you know, there's going to be some time zone restrictions on that in terms of what is and isn't practicable. But, you know, I'm just putting it out there. It's there. And I'm going to be honest, the extra money would be useful at the moment because I've just spent a whole lot on buying my new PC components. That stuff is all on its way. So I'm hoping by the end of the month, the new PC will be up and running and I'll have much faster render times. And, well, I don't know about better video quality. It's not like I'm going up to 1440p monitor or 4K monitor or anything like that just yet. But, you know, potentially in future, if I was to go and spend a bit of extra money, the actual PC itself could cope with it. So anyway, that aside, hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can hit the like button, you can leave any comments below, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.